I've had an intimate relationship with the black water since my father taught me to swim in 1934. An important rite of passage, though I can't remember it. Here in West Waterford, the river has come a long way from its source near the Cork Kerry border, and it's quite close to its Youghal Bay estuary. It flows between steep wooded ridges, somber in winter, lacy green in spring, heavily green in summer, and in autumn a glowing conflagration. To the north, in the near distance, rise the gentle blue curves of the Knockmeldown Mountains. East and west of Lismore, one may walk all day, seeing nobody, through a dog's paradise of woodlands and riverside meadows, where the terrain cannot have changed much since the 2nd century. Then Ptolemy took time off from stargazing and composed a map of the known world, including the Blackwater, already an important trading route. For lack of Romans, land transport inhibited Irish commerce until comparatively recently. Gradually, over the decades, nature has wrought numerous changes in this tranquil corner of the barony of Coshmore and Coshbride. Aged trees have surrendered to gales, or to the slow erosion of their supporting hedgerows, and now lie or lean at odd angles, wearing frills of fungi and housing an abundance of insects. An 18th century salmon weir wire has been dismantled by floods. Banks of sand and gravel come and go, creating temporary current-free inlets suitable for teaching small children to swim. Every winter brings certain modifications, usually subtle, but dramatic when great chunks of pastureland are torn away. Other riverbed transformations can seem almost magical, as when a deep, dark, glossy stretch is replaced, within a very few years, by a sparkling amber torrent, shallow enough for its stones to be visible. In the 1950s and 1960s, a dying willow was my diving board, but it now lies level with the bank, forming a highway for mink. Beautiful creatures, though widely and rightly resented. Since their arrival, the swines that habitually nested on the islet near the collapsed wire. Just upstream from Lismore Castle has moved the house. Responsible swans don't lay eggs within reach of mink, so I can no longer watch the tiny cygnets, little bigger than ducklings, rapidly becoming fawn gray adolescents. Swan life, being such a joy to watch, encourages anthropomorphism. Anthropomorphism. They seem the ideal family, parents mutually loving and faithful and sharing child care, adolescents happy to hang out with parents until something hormonal tells them it's time to seek a mate. Otter families are much rarer and even more endearing. In midsummer, I like to swim at sunrise, and 1 year two adults and a juvenile often appeared nearby. If I was already in the water, they ignored me and played. All three having fun chasing each other, doing gymnastics on a half-submerged fallen branch. Then one would move off to fish for breakfast, while the others continued to frolic. It seemed I was no threat, were swimming very slowly and quietly. But if they arrived first and saw me walking towards them, they immediately vanished. One memorable morning, I met an otter on the path, sitting on its haunches, sucking a swan's egg. On an even more memorable morning, my dogs interrupted an otter's breakfast by the water's edge. An apparent otter, no doubt. Allegedly, they never catch salmon. That 5-pounder became several suppers. I had to carry it home furtively, wrapped in colt's foot leaves, hoping not to be reported to the Duke of Devonshire's bailiff. Along this valley, on an average day, one sees what I think of as the quintet morn, duck, cormorant, heron, swan. Cormorants conspicuously colonize a dead elm for several years, then move on, then return. The herons stay put, always building their sprawling, noisome nests in the highest branches of towering sycamores or chestnuts. They are responsible for littering the banks with large horse mussel shells, once used by the locals as spoon substitutes. A poignant reminder of bygone days when many in this area lived in extreme poverty. While up and down this valley, stately homes were being embellished and spacious demesnes expanded. On lucky days, a winged jewel flashes past. Kingfishers nest where tangled tree roots protrude from the bank above a semi-stagnant inlet. Occasionally the jewel perches on an elder branch, and if I go still, treading water, I may see his lightning dive for something unidentifiable. On other lucky days, flocks of wild geese follow the river, their powerful wing music stirring a mysterious emotion, mix of reverence and diffuse nostalgia. Less common nowadays are the iridescent curlew flocks, their plaintive cries not matching their joyous, precisely choreographed swirlings across a wild sky. In recent years, a few newcomers have appeared among the cattle, slim, purser white egrets suggesting climate change. One May afternoon in 1941, I saw something unforgettable. My parents and I were approaching the Blackwater estuary on our way to Whiting Bay, when suddenly a man waving a red flag leaped out of a ditch. He had probably been dozing. In those days, motor traffic merely trickled and our Ford 10 was the only car on the road. Then, before my very eyes, your bridge seemed to disintegrate. Quickly came apart, and a three-mast schooner within an auxiliary engine sailed past us on its way to Kapokeen. Or maybe it was going to turn up the Pride with a cargo for Talo. 20 years later, I was to see from my bicycle setter one of the last merchant schooners taking advantage of the tide between Campfire and Romana. Campview? The sight of that splendid vessel sailing upstream past the waving fishermen grouped below Balintray House put my father into pedagogic gear. I associated the Blackwater with beauty, silence, and solitude, but now I learned about it as a crowded thoroughfare of considerable commercial and military importance. For some 2,000 years, boat and shipbuilding were a crucial part of riverside life. In the 19th century, 50-ton barges were still being built in such unlikely, to us, places as Ballyduff and Effin. The variety of cargoes carried up and down the Blackwater and Bride indicate how multi-skilled were these communities. Boat builders, sailmakers, woodcombers, and spinners and weavers, stonemasons, fishermen, woodcutters, sand spreaders, iron smelters, lime burners, leather tanners, basket makers, flour millers, bacon curers, cider brewers, rope makers, each person valued for his or her particular contribution to the local economy. Such people must have enjoyed a high level of self-respect. Now, too many of their descendants are reduced to using technologies that minimize physical labor, but can't do much for the individual's amour propre. Amour propre. 70 years ago, children could do their own summertime thing, unconstrained by our era's gruesome alliance between health and safety, neurotics, and comfort culture bandwagoners. At one stage, aged 8 or 9, I developed a craving for rides and carts, and sometimes ingratiated myself with the amiable young man who took delivery at the railway station of merchandise for the wine vaults, Lismore's main grocery shop. For the many other smaller shops, goods were loaded on handcarts. Only the wine vault could afford horsepower. That was an agreeable, though too short ride behind a briskly trotting gelding, a glossy chestnut with a white blaze and an evident sense of his own importance. More satisfying were the slow 4-mile journeys on Patsy Frank's donkey cart, carrying milk to Capuchin Creamery via Podarnamo, Podarma Neuve, said to be Ireland's oldest continually used road. Once upon a time, it crossed the Blackwater by the main ford below the round hill. In the 1940s, and long after, it was a potholed and deeply rotted bowling, almost overwhelmed in summer by its healthy, untamed hedges of ash plants and holly bushes, white thorn and black thorn, hazel, elder, and crabapple. Through occasional gateways, the Blackwater could be glimpsed beyond narrow strips of boggy land, which made Patsy Frank grumpy. Such land could and should be drained, but if the castle wasn't interested, no one would bother. The castle was shorthand for the Duke of Devonshire's estate. Infrequently, a very old woman, probably much younger than I am now, sought a lift and sat behind the churns, wearing a thick black shawl over her head, whatever the weather. She must have been among West Waterford's last shawlies. Approaching the Blackwater Valley Co-op, opened in 1914, one could smell its milkiness and hear the whirring of separators and the distinctive clatter of churns being scoured before the journey home. Around the creamery, it seemed no one ever hurried, and the farmers, wearing cloth caps and calf-length overcoats, their trouser legs bound with twine, held long, animated discussions, sometimes becoming angry arguments, where their animals enjoyed oat nosebags or bundles of hay. What were they discussing? Probably milk prices and politics, themes then closely linked. Nowadays, bureaucrats fix milk prices in distant tower blocks. On the way home, we might pause where Potamanov is left by the Blackwater, and Patsy, Frank would light a pipe while gossiping with four nephews who held licenses to snap net salmon just upstream from the kitchen hall. There's more flat-bottomed boats, model popular over the past 7,000 years, were known as cots, which for some reason made me giggle to Patsy Frank's irritation. His father, born in 1852, could remember dozens of cots fishing between Old Strankley Castle and the Bride Mouth. Each group of cotmen then had rights to a certain stretch, rights defended, when necessary, with fists. A few famed fishermen were credited with a sixth sense that enabled them to feel salmon swimming upstream by night. In 1600, as the New English were tightening their grip, a law banned the cots lest insurgents find them useful. This despite so many communities being dependent on fishing. Naturally, the cod law was ignored. However, the 1832 cholera epidemic was not ignored. It kept codmen away from the coast, and for months, yawls merchants had to collect their salmon from Villarstown Quay. By then, Blackwater salmon, exchanged for silk or wine, had gained renown across Europe. Traditionally, the man who tended Lismore's salmon hatchery beside a Ornashed, a minor Blackwater tributary, were cod makers in their spare time. As a 12-year-old, I joined a crowd who gathered there one evening to exclaim over a record snap net catch of 51.5-pound salmon landed by a 4-man cod crew. That summer, I was judged sufficiently mature, mentally and physically, to swim alone in a river I already knew so well. Thereafter, my two favorite activities supplemented each other. Cycling allowed me to find various secluded swimming spots between Markelop, some 8 miles west of Lismore, and Villarstown, about the same distance to the east. Downstream from the kitchen hall, one had to beware of the tide. Elsewhere, one had to check for dense underwater weeds. As a teenager, I once swam in the Bride, the Blackwater's main tributary, without first studying its tidal whims. I forget what prompted that lapse into mental immaturity, but I shall never forget my fear when I realized that I could neither swim back to my starting point nor reach the bank. Along that stretch, there was no visible bank, only treacherous, muddy reed beds. Not until the tide had carried me down to Campbell Bridge was I able to scramble ashore, very cold and very shaken. Luckily, haymakers had been near my starting point, otherwise I would have been naked. I set out to hitchhike back to my belongings, and soon a bemused elderly farmer, driving a cart load of spires to Shepperton, bravely picked me up and hastily wrapped me in sacking. Sacking? I wasn't the first reckless swimmer to have come ashore at Campfire Bridge. The Bride was famous for its reed beds. To this day, one sees a few spires stacked near the bridge. Sadly, people say they have been much weakened by agri-pollution, and for major jobs, thatchers must now import from Hungary or Turkey. Towards the end of the 1950s, motor traffic began to replace draft animals, to my great distress. Cyclists dislike sharing roads with other machines. Rapidly, the pace of life changed, as did attitudes to farming, which around then became the agriculture industry, an ominous semantic shift. Similarly, publishing became the book industry, to the great detriment of non-best-selling authors. By 1965, very few milk suppliers were driving carts to the creamery. West Waterford disappoints some of my foreign guests. They protest. It's too like Sussex or Dorset, too unlike Kerry or Donegal. I see their point. Yet to me, West Waterford, South Tipperary, and East Cork are incomparably satisfying. Everything is congenial. Every curve of the hills and valleys, every bend of the rivers and streams, every distinctive seasonal scent of fields and woods. This territory is my natural habitat, where I am ease in all weathers. It doesn't do to forget that we too are animals, albeit with certain unique capabilities increasingly lethal to our fellow animals. As for the natural beauties of Lismore, they are scarcely to be surpassed. The black water, both above and below the bridge, which leads into the town, flows through one of the most verdant of valleys, just wide enough to shew its greenness and fertility, and diversified by noble single trees and vine groups. Nothing, I say, can surpass in richness and beauty the view from the bridge, when at evening the deep woods and the grey castle of the still river are left in shade, while the sun streaming up the valley gilds all the softer slopes, gilds all the softer slopes and swells that lie opposite. To say that there are no unemployed poor and no beggars or paupers in Lismore would be to certain untruth. But I feel myself bound to say that of the former class there are comparatively few, and that a large proportion of the pauperism of Lismore does not naturally belong to it, but has resulted from the clearances of some neighboring and less considerate landlords. Henry the Inglis, Ireland, in 1834. Devla Murphy.